report. Uh, the topic of this show is I'm sick and tired of Jews calling me, labeling me anti-Semitic, and using that as a pretext to discriminate and otherwise uh, harass me. First of all, the truth be told, the most anti-Semitic people are Jews themselves. Adolf Hitler was a Jew. You're a Jew on your maternal bloodline. Hitler's grandmother was a Jew. His mother was a Jew. Therefore, Adolf Hitler was a Jew. But we don't even have to go there. Let's bring it here to America. Jews had been in America for 400 years without any problem whatsoever. I'm going to repeat that. Jews had been in America for 400 years without any problem whatsoever. From roughly the 1500s up to 1900. No problem whatsoever. The policy had been to exclude certain types of Jews from coming to America. The Jews who had been here again for 400 years without any problem were large, and they were prosperous, many of them. They respected the hierarchy, the power structure in this country. They respected that this is an Anglo-Saxon democracy, and they quote-unquote respected that. Around the late 1800s, around 1900, the policy of this government was to begin to allow largely Yugoslav, not exclusively, but largely Yugoslav Jews into America. The Jews who had been in this country for 400 years, from 1500 to 1900, were the ones who were most vocally opposed to opening the floodgates on immigration to Yugoslav Jews. I'm going to repeat that. The Jews who were most vocally opposed to letting the Yugoslav Jews in this country were the Jews who had been in America from 1500 roughly to 1900. No one knows a person better than their own. They've said to the Anglos, you are no match for those shysters, con men, and thieves. They're going to destroy America. They're going to destroy everything that we have built, taken 400 years to build. We are Jews. We're telling you, do not let those Jews in. You can check this all out online. America started letting them in the late 1800s. They really accelerated around 1900. So what did those Jews who had been in America again for 400 years with no problem, what did they do? This is the genesis of a lot of these Jewish charities, etc., etc. In an attempt to Americanize these Jews, they set up these charities to Americanize them, socialize them, right? Housing, education, healthcare, etc., etc. I would even argue that Freud developed psychoanalysis to straighten out the Jewish, that type Jew's twisted mind, in my humble opinion. So they let them in. They were the ones who were the most used. So they were the most extreme in their hatred of those Jews and most extreme in opposition to America allowing those Jews to come in. They let them in nevertheless, okay? Fast forwarding to the Nazi and Hitler in the Nazi era. As quiet as it's kept. There's what actually happened, there's history, and then there's revisionist history. During the Nazi era, right? The Jews would say things like, it serves those Jews right in it being in Europe. Uh, they had, trying to take over. It served them right. What did they expect to be but for the Europeans to crack down, the Germans to crack down? It served them right. They did not want to fight in World War II. Even mainstream quote-unquote newspapers like the New York Times, do you know today every time Israel sneezes, it's the front page of the New York Times. However, during World War II, very little coverage about the genocide that was going on, the genocide of Jews that was going on in Europe, even in the New York Times. Today, anything is like, Israel sneezes, it's the front page of the New York Times. Again, I find it hypocritical for Jews to be critical of me, right? To say that I'm an anti-Semite, because in my opinion, no one is more anti-Semitic than a Jew, because no one knows a person better than a Jew. I'm going to repeat it. Hitler was a Jew. He was a Jew. His mother, you're a Jew on your maternal bloodline. His grandmother was a Jew. His mother was a Jew. Therefore, Adolf Hitler was a Jew. The Jews who had been in America for 400 years without a problem, was no problem with Jews taking over, not knowing their place, stepping on other people's toes. They had been here for 400 years. They had built a wonderful life in America. Those Jews were the most vocally opposed to letting Jews like Bloomberg, Schumer, Koch, Lautenberg, Feinstein, Boxer, those Jews in this country, if you get my drift. There's history, there's revisionist history, and then there is what actually happened. What actually happened. So we see, fast forwarding today, we're on the edge of a precipice. We're on the edge of a precipice, on the edge of a cliff, ready to fall over. It's analogous, as I have said. I've said it years ago. This is what this was all leading to. In the 1920s, you had this burst of technologies and with electronics and Edison and the gadgets and the gizmos, the cars, the refrigerators, the stoves, the radios, and all of that. And then you had a collapse, and then you had a great shakeout and a consolidation of wealth. Maybe 50, 100 automobile companies. In America, after that, there may be 5. And so we had this great new burst of technologies, is IT, information technology. And so again, there's going to be a big collapse, bottom falling out. And again, there's going to be a consolidation of wealth. As a humanist, as someone who is deeply concerned about the human condition, my prayers are that the Anglo-Saxon tribe maintains control of this world. Because if it doesn't, for example, if Wall Street, which has been hijacked, let me be frank, by Jewish bankers, and they're the ones who have run the global economy in the ground, in my opinion, through the mortgage mess, the sovereign debt, whatever, credit card, whatever. First of all, when the bottom falls out, I think what's going to happen, that those Jewish bankers Wall Street is going to attempt to buy the global economy pennies on the dollar. Why pennies on the dollar? Because the value of these corporations will be pennies on the dollar, right? That would be a disaster for the vast majority of humanity, and ironically, even for the Jews, because they are not going to keep it. It would go to what I call the Polish lobby, because even as Jews have told me, there's going to be a pogrom, a Holocaust, a final solution. They have told me that, quote, nothing can stop it, right? So, in fact, I vividly recall being at Columbia University, Barnard College, and Eleanor Cliff, a supposedly liberal, progressive journalist who was writing for Newsweek at the time, She's on the McLaughlin Report. It's a conservative show. She's the so-called liberal progressive. And she was on a panel, and she said it openly on the panel. The president of Barnard College was there, Columbia, Judith Shapiro, in an audience that was largely upper middle class and more affluent Jews. Hitler was a class thing. Now, when she said that, I wanted to puke. And the context which she said it in can easily be confirmed because they videotape everything, all those panels and stuff. And she was on the panel and said it when she got the microphone. Hitler was not a class thing, first of all. But that is the mentality of certain types. It's okay if we go in and we mess up a country and everything we get kicked out. We're rich. The rich Jews are going to survive. It's the little Jews who are going to feel the brunt of the pogrom. That's my interpretation. But you know, as I said, they videotape everything at those things at Columbia and Barnard. But that she was sadly mistaken. If you look historically, Hitler was not a class thing. A lot of people got confused because he did let the rich Jews out of Europe, the ones who could buy their way out. But that, I think, was Hitler's hedging his bets, because he didn't know which way the powers that be were going to go. Were they going to let the Nazis win, or were they going to let the Allies win? So in case my thinking is that in case he didn't let the Nazis win, he figured if he let the rich Jews go, the Nazis wouldn't be prosecuted. And very few, Nuremberg, let me be frank, was a joke. Very few Nazis were really punished for their crimes. They just got a slap on the wrist. Even many who got long sentences at Nuremberg, a few years later they were released from prison. You could check all that out. Typically, the Nazis who were and who continue to be criminally prosecuted are those who brag about their participation in the Holocaust or their war crimes, quote unquote. In fact, in Germany, the Germans who have gotten their pensions without a problem have been those who were the most loyal government workers who were Nazis. Those who resisted the Nazi movement have had to jump over high hurdles to get their pensions from the German government. This can be confirmed too. The most authoritative book on the Nazi era, really the ongoing Nazi era, is a book, the name of the book is The Beast Reawakens, and you better believe it's true. So that is the most authoritative book that I've ever read on the history of the Nazi movement, and it's very much alive and well. Right here in this country, in the far west, they have neo-Nazi groups and everything. Jews don't touch them. In the prisons, right? They're recruiting grounds for neo-Nazis. White inmates who want to get protection from black and Latino gangs, they join white Nazi gangs. This has been going on for years. The Jews are not as powerful as people think. I say all that because, again, those Jews who had been in this country for 400 years without a problem, who didn't want the Jews that have come in here and done things like hijack Wall Street, or who've done things like use Hollywood to destroy religious-based values in society. Now, I'm not a prude, not at all. I am a very live and let live person. But I do know that one of the defining characteristics of a civilization in decline or a fallen civilization is the erosion of religious-based values. I'm not saying we have to be puritanical, not at all, not at all. But I do, as a gay, disabled woman of color, of course not. I believe in human rights, civil rights, gay rights, women's rights, workers' rights. I believe in it. But I do believe there should be the rule of law. I do believe in equality. I do believe in equal justice under the law. I do believe that no one is above the law. And I do know that when the society's moral and ethical fabric is so frayed that when you go to buy a cell phone, you get a headache because they tell you up is down, down is up, right is wrong, wrong is right. It's like you're dealing with shysters, conmen, and thieves, and this is the way marketing has become in many sectors of the American economy. I know that America is in crisis. Or when I see what's happening in public education, or when I see that the social services system in this country is designed to perpetuate dysfunction, addiction, uh, you know, I know that this is a society in decline, in crisis. And we know a lot of these things. The media, as Marshall, another important book, Marshall McLuhan, I don't know, it's out of print. The media is the message. And the media has perpetuated this dysfunction. Hollywood, etc., etc., has perpetuated this dysfunction. There's nothing hip or cool about using dope, right? Why do I just it's first of all, it's a rich man's vice, right? Poor people have no business, I mean, involved in, because it's something it's a progressive disorder they can't afford. And you know, people get hooked on dope, right? And there's some form, not all forms of crack cocaine that are so potent that you'd use it once and you're hooked. That's how potent some of these chemicals are. So they target kids whose parents, even among working class, who have a little more, in working class communities, parents have a little more money because they figure the kids can steal and break the parents to get the money on the dope, the potent form of dope. So, or the rich kids or whatever. So, but addiction, it's not hip or cool, because you may take it first, you may get the good euphoria, but then after a while, you're just taking it. I don't take dope. No, I don't use dope. But they're using the dope just to fight the craving. They're not even, it's not pleasurable, it's to avoid, it's not for something pleasurable, it's just to avoid the pain of the craving. There's nothing hip or cool about that. And drugs have historically been used to bring a civilization down. That has been, so this country was flooded with dope. So it has been, this country, the social dysfunction, the drugs, the economic dislocation. America is not coming back, and the politicians know that, and they're lying to the American people. This is like pre-Nazi Germany, Weimar Germany. People can talk about what's going on in Europe, all the labor and all the protests. It's infinitely healthier than what is happening in this country, where the government is just monetizing the debt, printing money. When the bottom falls out, like in pre-Nazi Germany, people had to take a wheelbarrow, literally a wheelbarrow of currency to go to the grocer to get a bottle of milk. That's how bad, how hyper the inflation was. And that came about by printing money and what the Bernanke, the Federal Reserve, calls stimulus, stimulus, stimulus. They're printing money, and eventually it's going to happen here, right? The inflation is going to go through the roof. And so in Europe, they're not monetizing the debt. So you see the impact of the unemployment, etc., etc., which is a healthier thing than sweeping these problems under the rug and just printing money. Because eventually, when the bottom falls out, the countries that have been printing the money are going to have the most difficult time of all. America is not coming back. These politicians are lying to the American people because they want the American people to vote for them, not to hold them accountable for destroying this country. And I identify with the Tea Party movement insofar as I blame the government, the federal government, the Republicans and Democrats largely in Washington, D.C., and the intellectuals who come up with the theories, whether it's neocon paradigm, whether it's print money, monetize the debt, whether it's stimulus, whether it's $1 trillion to Wall Street, whether it's outsourcing the budget to Iraq or Iran or Iraq or Afghanistan or Libya or whatever, or Syria, instead of investing in this country. Let me be frank. When the good old boys ran Wall Street, those Anglo-Saxons managed it, people like Walter Wriston and John Reed, the banks reinvested in the communities far more than they did today. They didn't take the money and had these obscene bonuses. Let me be frank, when the Anglo-Saxons ran Wall Street and banking, they did not make the salaries and bonuses that they're making today. They didn't. Because, in part of the reason is, instead of like being bloodsuckers, taking all the money out of Wall Street for personal compensation, they reinvested the money. So, for example, the other day I was by Columbus Circle, 59th Street, West Side, Manhattan. Now, that area was redeveloped, right? And that's where Time Warner has its global headquarters, right? And they did a lot of redevelopment. It was always upscale people there. Redevelopment. I went there and it's starting to look like a ghetto again. And I can only conclude that it is because the banks, and those, they can't say, oh, those are people that's in the ghetto and they don't give us money, there's no money to reinvest, which is not true either. Black communities, they put a ton of money in these banks. But those are very wealthy people. And they put tons and tons and tons of money in those banks. And the banks are not reinvesting even in that community, with those wealthy people. So it's starting to look bad after they put all that money in to develop it. When the Anglo-Saxons controlled banking in this country, we didn't have managed it, Wall Street. We didn't have subprime mortgage mess. We didn't have all of these liar loans. We didn't have this global crisis, debt crisis. Because they reinvested in the communities where one of the main reasons is because they reinvested in the communities where they did business. They weren't like bloodsuckers taking it out for compensation. It was just reported a week or so ago. The CEO with the highest bonus in America was someone from one of these, either it was Salomon Brothers or Goldman Sachs, one of those investment banking firms. Just pushing paper, not making things in the economy, not producing real tangible things, just pushing paper around. You know this is a country in crisis. And again, so I'm saying all that to say, again, the Jews who had been in America for 400 years without a problem, no, they did their thing in their communities. Some were very prosperous, etc. But they knew they had boundaries. They understood that they should respect other people enough that they had boundaries. They didn't violate other people's, territory, or whatever you want to call it, psychologically or even materially. Those Jews have to be furious, pardon the pun, with the Jews that this country decided to let in huge numbers starting in the late 1800s, early 1900s, because as they said it would happen, when those Jews who had been here for were so vocally opposed to letting them in, as they said they were going to destroy America and they were going to destroy everything that they had built for 400 years without a problem. Now I know Jews from that group, and I know group Jews from the other group, and I know what I'm talking about. I vividly recall when I was talking to, I have had conversations, because this is how I've known about what's going to happen. The Jews have told me about the pogrom. Eleanor Clift, Hitler was a class thing. She said that in that panel at Barnard, Columbia University. But I have talked, not in public venue, privately with Jews, and they know. They know, even professors at Columbia, of course there's going to be a Holocaust, of course. But I know how those Jews who were here for 400 years, because I have had the good fortune to know Jews like that, and I know they're furious because they didn't want them in here. They said they were going to hijack this country. Not only destroy this country, but destroy everything that those Jews who had been in this country for 400 years had built. And indeed they had. And as a consequence, we face the mother of all pogroms. I'm Beverly Copeland. This has been the Beverly Copeland Report.